Greetings and welcome to the Progressive Christians podcast. We are the love your neighbor kind of Christians and not the storm of the Capitol kind. So if you're curious about what a socially and politically progressive Christianity looks like, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter and I'm your host. I want to invite you to please rate, review, share, and subscribe to our podcast and whatever podcast platform you are using. Thank you for those of you who are doing so, giving us 5-star reviews on Spotify or iTunes. We really appreciate it as it does do a lot to help other people not only find our show, but then to give our show a certain kind of credibility. In today's episode, as you might suspect, we will be discussing how the city that all four of us live in, the city that I've called home for several years, and really just the community that I've been a part of for almost 20 years, is on fire. Today is a solo episode, as all of us in some way, shape, or form have been impacted by the fires. Reverend Blair lives close to the Eaton fire, and she has evacuated down in San Diego. I'm currently in San Diego as well. This is where I used to live prior to moving to Los Angeles. Julia has left her place where she lives in Los Angeles and West LA and Wesley's in central Los Angeles, and is actually housing people who have been displaced. It's been wild. It's honestly been a wild time. I'm grateful that we're all safe and grateful that we haven't lost anything in terms of real value. However, within the church community that we work in, we have had 3 members, at least that we know of, have lost their homes, or maybe more. People haven't been able to get back to their homes. All of us have other friends that have lost their homes, friends that live closer to the various fires that are around the city, have lost everything. We are all a part of larger communities where people are grieving and just trying to make sense of what has happened and what is continuing to happen right now in the greater Los Angeles area. The church where we work at in Westwood is closest to the Pallisades fire. It's not too far from the Sunset fire. And to be honest, everything started so quickly. No one really knows how the fire started, but because of the conditions that I'll talk a little bit more about later on, the high winds, the dryness, it could have been anything from, it could have been a cigarette, it could have been a spark from somebody, a trailer towing something and a chain sparking. I mean, it literally could have been anything because that's how dry it has been here, especially where the fire actually is taking place for the last several months. One of the things that's maybe people don't understand is just, and maybe some of y'all do, how hard it is to just get a foothold in this city. And people are looking at the Palisades and like, oh, these are wealthy people. These are people who can afford, broadly speaking, to rebuild. But it's so hard to buy property here. It's so hard to buy property and then to get it insured because of earthquakes, because of fires, and because, as we've discussed on this podcast, the nature of the insurance agencies in general. And so you read these stories about these people who are, what we would consider working class out in Los Angeles, trying to do everything they can to save their homes in the Palisades, right? People who are literally got goggles on, they have N95 masks on, they have their hose out in front of their yard, and they are spraying down bushes and they're trying to keep the fire from spreading to their yards. And literally they're doing the best that they can with what they have on Tuesday. And then they realize on Tuesday night and Wednesday, like it's just not going to be enough, that they're going to have to leave and they're having to evacuate immediately. And to be clear, there's not a ton of roads to get down some of these areas. And so there was traffic congestion. People had to abandon their cars, leave their keys in the cars so that the police could move them later for fire trucks. It was fairly scary, to be honest with you. It was very, very scary. And I just can't imagine, right, being forced from your house. Maybe you just have like an hour to prepare before you actually get the alert from the city that we're supposed to leave. And in that hour, you're supposed to get all your stuff and do the best you can to get out to safety, knowing that everybody in your neighborhood is also trying to get out to safety, trying to drive down the same exact roads. You're trying to get your dogs, your cats, whatever other companion animals you have, and just the things in your life that you think matter to you. Right? What would you take? Like, imagine having to go through the process of thinking about what's the most important things to take. And then imagine coming back to your home, seeing it burn down to the ground and agonizing, recognizing that maybe you got some of the things you wanted, but there's other things that if you had just thought a little bit more critically or maybe were a little bit more prepared, you would have got these other stuff as well. That's exactly how one of my friends actually wrote about how they are processing everything. They didn't get everything they wish they would have, and they feel frustrated and they feel a certain kind of ignorance, and they have this guilt and they're sad and shame, and there's all these complex feelings because they wish they had done better, but there's no way you can actually do better. Like, this is real life. This is a actual natural disaster. This is what I told them, to try to do my best to console them, but just knowing that no matter what I say, they're going to be dealing with this grief, this trauma, probably for the rest of their lives. You know, my family was fortunate in that we were able to leave. We decided we would leave once we realized we were pinched between the Palisades and the Sunset fire. We knew that meant that one of the evacuation routes that we could take was closed. We really could no longer go east. We'd only be able to go south. There's only a few highways that actually go south, and those highways are always full of traffic. And so we just decided that it'd be best for us to go to San Diego and stay with friends. And we're fortunate to be able to do that. So many people don't have any place to go, or they have to go to one of the evacuation centers, which are still in Los Angeles, that are already full. They may not accept pets. There's all these kinds of, and my dog is right over to my right, like over here asleep. Like, there's all these limitations that we're able to overcome because of the community, the networks that I have, and the privilege that I have, the economic privilege that I have to be able to come down here. And that's just not something we can take for granted, how difficult of time this is for people who had to do this and evacuate so quickly. And I think that's a part of the reason why, to be honest with you, I'm so frustrated by some of the coverage that I'm seeing on social media. You know, I like to consider myself a compassionate person, someone who tries to see the best in people. And it continues to blow my mind when conservative political pundits take the opportunity of any natural disaster to belittle and dehumanize people, right? So it's frustrating for me to see social media sources saying and blaming the fires on everything except for what actually is the cause of the fires, which in truth is climate change and funding, which again I'll say more about in a moment. People like Elon Musk, you know, people on X, they blame DEI because the fire chief is a queer woman, and they ignore the fact that she is a 24-year veteran of fire fighting. She knows what she's doing, and somehow the fact that she is a woman, that makes it more difficult for her to do her job. That just literally doesn't make any sense given her experience. You know how hard it is to be a firefighter, how hard it must be to be a woman firefighter, how hard you have to work your way up to get to that position. The fact of the matter is, she's probably the most qualified, which is why she has that job in the first place. And so they ignore the fact that she has such experience. We have people like Donald Trump Jr. Or people and Matt Walsh who are using this time to derail or to talk about DEI and make the false claim that white men have been prevented from getting jobs at the fire department. A fundamental misunderstanding of the ways in which hiring processes have historically worked. And it's kind of going back to the Supreme Court ruling that we had on affirmative action, right? Suggesting that somehow that's the reason why these people haven't gotten jobs, which again isn't true. It's all tied to funding. It has nothing to do with that. If white men wanted to work at the fire department in Los Angeles, they're more than welcome to apply. Unfortunately, they may not be able to get paid. You have people like Charlie Kirk arguing that we have wasted money on programs that, I don't know, help unhoused people and provide public transportation. He calls these ideas and other such public infrastructure funding ideas dumb, right? And he tries to generalize it and say, well, these are just dumb ideas. And somehow, because we tried to actually house people, because we tried to actually build public transportation, that's why our city's on fire. That's why I can look outside my window and see smoke in the air and know that there are fires, literally raging fires, 4 and 6 miles in either direction of where I live. Jesse Waters literally said the Indians are responsible for tearing down Western civilization and spreading fires. That just doesn't make any sense. And people are buying into it. They want to buy into some kind of myth as to why these fires started. Anything but the actual truth. And the truth is, the cause of these fires mostly comes down to climate change. That's just the actual truth. We have Santa Ana winds, which historically come every year. And this year, they're just extremely strong. This year, they've been between 50 and 100 miles per hour. Now, just to have some context, around 70 miles per hour is enough wind gusts to be classified as a category 1 hurricane. So we have hurricane level winds mixed with fire. So imagine a hurricane, instead of water, it's a hurricane of fire. That's actually what people are dealing with. And when you combine that with because of climate change, the fact that we've had a dry and continue to have drier winters, we've been in, broadly speaking, perpetual drought for the last 30 to 40 years. We've had years interspersed where we've had water, but not enough water. This winter has been especially dry, and you just have kindling. At this point, houses are like kindling. So as soon as a spark hits them and it's this windy, and if you know anything about fire, oxygen spreads fire, right? It's just giving it more fuel. That is one of the biggest reasons why we are in this situation, right? It is unfortunate. It is unfortunate this is happening, and it has almost everything to do with global climate change and nothing to do with the ridiculous theories that these conservative politicians are putting out. And part of the reason we don't have enough firefighters, to be clear, is because we wasted and divested and redirected funds to the police. So, for instance, there was a $17.6 million decrease in funding for firefighters, while simultaneously approving a $126 million increase to the police budget. That, more than anything else, is why we don't have enough firefighters. Why we don't have enough firefighting equipment. Not to mention the fact that we have equipment we can't use because it is so windy. We have helicopters and all kinds of equipment that we cannot use because it is so windy. These people that don't take the time to think critically about why we are in the situation we're in and feel as though they can just belittle people who've actually lost their lives, right? They can use this as a political stunt. I don't know why, but it continues to shock me. It continues to disappoint me. It continues to make me angry. And it continues to make me wonder, how can people want to listen to these folks who clearly actually don't value anybody's life more than their own? They do not love their neighbor as much as they love themselves. They love themselves first and foremost. They have created a God in their own image, and that is the God who they worship. So for progressives and people of faith who actually care about the victims, rather than trying to use the fires to make ourselves look right, there are a few things you can do. So if you live in the LA area, you can consider donating food, clothing, and other items to local shelters. If you have some space in your house, you could consider fostering a companion animal to people who are suffering as victims from this fire. As y'all probably know, if you listen to this podcast before, my wife is a veterinary oncologist. Her hospital is going to be doing all kinds of work, a lot of pro bono work, even next week. I think a lot of clinics are going to be doing that, and a lot of clinics are going to be trying to help the veterinarians who lost their jobs because their clinics actually caught on fire. If you don't live in the LA area, I'm going to have a link, two links actually, that are going to link to the LA Times article that has a really good list of places that you can donate to. And LAist has another good list of places that you can actually send aid to and help, because I'm sure there's lots of ways people want to help. I'm not an expert in this area, but I found some people who I really trust, and I'm going to put their information on there so y'all can help if you are able to. Lastly, I want to invite you to pray for the victims. I am a person that believes not only the power of prayer, but prayer leads to action, right? We should not just be a hearer of the word, but a doer of the word, as the writer of James says. And doing the things I'm inviting you to, right, where you are trying to volunteer, maybe you're sending money or whatever it is you can do, please continue to do that. But also recognize that there are people who are suffering, and praying and lifting them up is one thing that I think we all can do to help them as they go through this process, as we are all going through this process of grief. And so in closing the podcast today, I am going to read a prayer that I wrote, and I invite you to pray along with me. If you're driving, if you're listening to this, you don't have to close your eyes to pray. That's just something that we've picked up on in the West, but it's not fundamentally necessary. As I will not be closing my eyes because I'll be reading most of what I wrote. Let us be in an attitude of prayer. God who knows we have nowhere to hide from this void. Thank you for being a God who was moved to tears by death. For in so doing, you remind us that one can know healing is imminent and still make space to grieve what is. God, we are reminded that hope and grief are not mutually exclusive when we think about the fact of your tears and the reality of them. And so, Lord, we ask that you would help us hold the victims of these fires in our minds, that you would help us hear their voices, their laughs, that you would allow them to echo in our conscious. Lord, that you would give us the strength and courage to help us mourn for those humans and those non-human animals who have left us, who have lost their life and transitioned to the beyond. We ask that you give comfort to their families and their communities, and that perhaps we can be a part of that comforting process in whatever way is best fit for us and for those families of the victims. God, we confess that we have failed. We have failed the land, and we have not done and lived up to our responsibilities as stewards of this land. We have given into the convenience of machines, and we have been swept up in overconsumption. Many of us have bought into the myth of what makes America great. It is not, in fact, a kind of political ideology, but it is, in fact, our GDP and what we can buy and what we can have, even though that comes at the expense of what others can have around the world. Lord, give us the courage, give us and the news media the courage to name the atrocity of climate change and the courage to upheave corporations and institutions that leech off the earth without concern for our survival. Lord, give us the strength to hold the corporations accountable, because we know, Lord, that it is 20 corporations that are responsible for 80% of the global climate change emissions that happen on this planet. Lord, all planetary life is interconnected, and we know we cannot flourish on a landscape of smoke and ash. Help us. Help us create a better way forward. Give us a vision of what we ought build. Give us a vision of what a beloved community ought be that is inclusive of non-human nature, Lord, that takes our responsibility to be stewards seriously. Help us to develop this better way forward, even as we mourn what we have lost. And may our mourning look how it must from one moment to the next. Lord, free us from guilt about how much sadness we feel, or perhaps free us from the guilt that we have because we're not feeling very much at all. We are just beyond feeling. Help us to hold our tears as sacred, never being too quick to wipe them away or to keep them prisoner, knowing that our freedom is wrapped up in theirs. May it be so. Amen. Thank you all for joining us for the Progressive Christians podcast. I definitely want to give a shout out to Cole Arthur Riley and Black Liturgies, who wrote, I pulled portions of several of her prayers to put this together and added my own work to it. But I find her work so inspirational and turn to it at this time. If you're not familiar with her work, I highly recommend reading it. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for your support. Thank you all for your prayers. And we look forward to returning with regular programming next week. Hopefully things will die down and be a little bit better, and we can all get back to doing the things we want to do, the things we love to do, talking about progressive Christianity and equipping you all to live your best lives, to be able to call people in to the community of what it means to be a follower of Christ, to be a part of the beloved community, to just be the person that we believe God has called us to be, to live in this ground of being that we call love, this cosmic source that pulls us towards itself, that invites us to be our best selves. May it be so. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.